Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Well Versed. My name is Layman, and today I have a really special guest, someone I've been following for some time now on TikTok. She is a licensed friendship coach as well as life coach, and she has a TikTok where she's amassed a ton of followers and gives advice on friendship, how to navigate friendships, as well as a workbook, which I definitely plan to check out, called We Used to Be Friends.
Yeah, we used to be best friends.
We Used to Be Best Friends, which is guided workbook to help you through friendship breakups. So I'm really excited to introduce Sabrina. Welcome to Well Versed.
I'm so excited. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you for joining. So I'll get right into it. But first, I kind of want to know a little bit of a background on you. Like, how do you get into something like friendship coaching?
Honestly, it was very random. It was very random because I had a very detrimental friendship breakup. And when I did my research or try to find podcasts or try to find like books or anything like that, I found nothing. Like there was nothing out there. So I thought it was like my own personal little problem. And I started just kind of recording videos on TikTok because I felt like I needed to vent, to talk about it, to like share what I'm hearing. And then I didn't expect it to blow up the way it did, honestly. I'm still shocked to this day.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like friendship is such a hot topic these days. And I don't know if it's because people are having difficulty making friends, but one thing that I thought was really interesting is people go to life coaches for like their career, or, we go to therapists for romantic relationships, but nobody really thinks of someone for their friendships. And so do people come to you to kind of like mediate friendship problems or?
I mean, I've never done like a 101 where there's two friends mediating. I would love to do that. That would be, if that's a possibility, I would be very good, I think, at that. But usually people talk to me about their friendship breakups and what has happened. They kind of just need validation or like an idea of, hey, am I crazy? Am I dealing with abuse?
Yeah.
And sometimes, yes, it's abuse. Even in friendships, it's kind of crazy.
Yeah, no. And that's something that people don't acknowledge. I found you on TikTok because so I'm guilty of loving like a 10-part series. And I found you because of I think it was My Toxic Best Friend, or I can't remember the title, but I just watched the first one, then I'd watch the second one. I just kept watching. And it was kind of crazy because seeing it from an outside perspective, I've kind of went through a lot of those same things, but you never realize how insane it is until you're out of a situation like that. And you look back and you're like, okay, that was not good. That was not okay.
I mean, when I was in it, I didn't understand what I was going through was emotional abuse. And then after I was out of it and I was kind of like feeling all these strange feelings and I was going through panic attacks and I was dealing with a lot of like things that you deal with after trauma. I was like, okay, I need to go to therapy. I need to figure this out. I go to therapy and I tell my therapist the story. When you hear it out loud, you're like, oh, it is that bad. And then my therapist was like, you went through emotional abuse. And I was like,
no, not really.
With a friend? You're crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it is what it is. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's more common than you think. I'm curious on your thoughts. Like, why do you think friendship, or even like female friendship, why is it so complex and difficult? Is it always been this way, you think? Or is it just something that people are experiencing more in today's day and age with how busy people are, the lack of time that people have, but also the need for like connectedness and closeness?
Yeah. I also think we kind of make it complicated for ourselves.
Yeah.
But I also think that we have never been taught how to establish a healthy friendship. I mean, honestly, if you look back at all of the shows that we have grown up with, like take, for example, Gossip Girl. I mean, every show is kind of like, oh, here's a best friend that backstabs you, does so many horrible things, but at the end of the episode, we're friends again.
Yeah.
And we've kind of been taught like we need to tolerate terrible behavior and we don't know how to deal with a friendship breakup. We don't know how to deal with conflict. We don't know how to establish a good friendship or a healthy friendship at all. We're just kind of like, oh, let's pick this person. They're cool. Then we figure out that they're not a good person and we stick with them.
Yeah.
And then we end up going through hell with that person.
But also, I think sometimes people just don't want to put in the time as well. when I think of my first examples of friendship, I think of my mom's friends. And those were such like deep friendships. I feel like friendship was almost like siblings. So you kind of put in the time with your friends, you know. It wasn't about going to dinners or, you know, doing all these glamorous activities. Your friend is the type of person that can spend hours with you at your home or is there when you're sick or he cooks you a meal. And I think today people are just so busy that they want that really deep friendship, but then they're not willing to put in the effort that it takes to get there, which is a lot of work.
Yeah, it takes time, it takes effort, it takes patience. Um, but I also think we're kind of guilty because of social media makes things very easy and like fake glamorous too. I mean, think about back then, in order to keep someone in your life and keep that friendship, you had to call, you had to send letters, you had to show up. There wasn't social media where you can keep up with someone's life by like looking at a story. And I think that's kind of like we keep people in our lives that don't really pay attention to us, but they still have access to us through social media. So that's also one of the core issues, I think.
And based on kind of like what you went through, and I think a lot of people have gone through that, what are, if you were to say like maybe 5 green flags, and we can kind of get into each of them a little bit, but what are some green flags that you suggest people look for when they're kind of making new friendships?
Probably I would say they're asking questions about you and wanting to get to know you. They're also telling you about themselves, and they have like different goals, desires, dreams. Another red flag I would say is how they plan the outing. Um, I think it says a lot about somebody, like how they consider what you want to do, what you like to do in your time, and making plans can be kind of difficult. So we're all busy. So sometimes having somebody be like, hey, do you have time, this date here and here, and then following through with that and not canceling last second. So it's a lot of communication and consideration that I think are the biggest green flags in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. And like some red flags that come to mind, but I'm curious on your opinion. And it's crazy because these are things that when I was younger, what I would have thought were green flags, but now I kind of think are red flags. But something that comes to mind from my experiences is a really quick attachment to you without any, just without any, it's almost like, why do you like me? I haven't even shown you any side of me. So I don't trust you because you just like me based off of nothing. And I know that sounds weird because when you're younger, you kind of think of it's amazing. Me and this person connect. There's chemistry in the context of like friendship and it's so exciting. But then I always find those types of friendships crash and burn really quickly.
Yeah. I mean, I've talked about this. Love bombing does happen in friendships. And there's a big difference between someone being excited to be friends with you and someone who's like love bombing you, where they start to adapt and love everything about you. So it's like, for example, let's say me and you are friends, and let's say you're love bombing me. If I say I'm into tennis and I love tennis, then suddenly you're going to be like, oh my God, I love tennis. Tennis is the most greatest sport in the entire world. Like we should play tennis. We should like go on tennis outings. And suddenly it's like your like is something that you like as well. And it's blown up into proportion. But if I actually digged in deeper to see if you like tennis, you have never played a day in your life. You don't know anyone on tour. You can't even name one tennis player. And it's like, you don't own a tennis racket. You know nothing about tennis. And it's like, okay, now you love tennis. Like that doesn't make sense because you've never loved it before. But yeah, love bombing is a huge thing in friendships, and it's kind of scary.
Yeah. How do you kind of tell the difference though? Because sometimes there are just people you have a connection with. How do you kind of tell the difference?
They're their own person. Like you have your goals, they have their goals. They have their hobbies, you have your hobbies. It's kind of like they also allow you to be your own self and independent. So if you like to go painting and you have like a class every Thursday, they let you do your thing. That's your painting class. Like, I'm proud of you and I'll come support you. Someone that love bombs suddenly everything that you do has to be with them. So like, it's not just hanging out. It's like, oh, your painting class on Thursday. Why didn't you invite me? Like, we should go painting together. And they don't give you your own autonomy, your own independence. And that's where it becomes kind of like that codependency. And it's very, very overbearing.
Yeah, it's very overbearing and kind of hard to get out of, especially if you just let it go on for so long. Another one that comes to mind for me that I've noticed through navigating new friendships is people who are very romantic relationship centered. So in the context of female friendships, if you date men, I've found that there are sometimes women who are very male centered. And so they're great friends maybe when they're in the stage of looking for friendship or like not in a relationship, but then once they're in that relationship, they're kind of nowhere to be found. It's something you have to navigate with friendships, with long-term friendships, when those dynamics just change because of marriage and kids and things like that. So I think those are two separate things, but something that I find very interesting.
I personally believe that you're your most healthy when you're able to navigate your romantic relationship, your friendships, your family, and the relationship you have with yourself. I think it's part of codependency where you have all these friends, and then the moment you get a romantic relationship, you drop all your friends, and then you're all about the guy. That tells me you have lost your own sense of relationship with yourself, and you've lost the relationship that with your friends that has constructed you and made you you. I don't think it's a healthy thing to do, to just suddenly lose everything that made you you before the man.
Yeah. Yeah. Literally, it's interesting because then I think how it always ends up is that after the relationship falls apart, or if it falls apart, then these friends kind of come back into your life, but then you're just in a different place because that friendship is like no longer there.
Yeah. And personally, I usually don't let those friends back in my life, because if they've done it once, they'll do it again. And I don't like feeling like I'm a placeholder friend where it's like, oh, I'm here to vent boohoo about the man. And then when a new guy comes along, you don't know who I am anymore. It's not a good feeling.
Yeah.
And it's not a good thing to do to a friend, to be honest.
How do you know you're a placeholder friend? I know romantic relationships is one example, but are there other ways you can tell that, yeah, I'm kind of your friend you just go to when you literally have nobody, which is the worst?
I mean, just look at the conversation. Are you only talking about guys all the time? Are you talking about other things like your dreams, your goals, your hobbies? Or is it just male-centered? You'll also notice that girls that do that will drop you last second to hang out with the guy. So like these are all little things, like the guy will come first, even if you've made plans weeks in advance.
Yeah. Yeah. Those are just even some examples. And I've experienced that before. And it's just like not a good feeling as well, right? Like,
it's the worst feeling.
Yeah, it is the worst. And I know like you kind of experience parts of that as well in like your friendship breakup story. But I'm kind of curious, something that came to mind, and I've thought of this about myself as well, also while I was listening to like your series, is when you were going through kind of like the therapy to kind of get over all of that, did you ever think about how, like what kind of gravitates or attracts us towards friendships that way? Is that kind of out of our control, or are there things in like our childhood that maybe make us more susceptible to having friends that kind of, for lack of a better word, like push us over a bit?
I mean, yes and no. I feel like in childhood, I was surrounded by narcissistic behavior. So I feel like I ended up, I don't like to say attracting, because I feel like you can attract anyone, but I ended up choosing and keeping people that was comfortable to me because I was used to that. So I ended up bringing in friends that were very narcissistic and very self-centered. And I thought that that was like normal, where I have to be the one to do everything for them because I'm a friend. And the more you start to heal, grow, and get some confidence and actually put yourself first and not see that as selfishness, you start to realize how much someone is like using you and taking advantage of you, and you start to choose differently. So you can attract anyone. Most of the time, people that are healthy seem boring, especially if you're surrounded by chaos. So you're like, I don't want to deal with them. They're boring. And you don't pick them, even though they might be better, healthy version. So yeah, I think it's who we choose and who we surround ourselves with and who we keep at the end of the day.
Yeah. And that's a bit of like a learning process too. So I'm curious because I know there's a lot of research that says we go through like 7-year cycles in friendship. to some degree, when I look back at my history of friendships, it does make sense because you're kind of in different phases. It doesn't mean you necessarily drop all of your friends, but you may have your friends at different levels in your life. What those levels are categorized, I don't know, but you kind of just go through a process of making new friends that better align with where you're at and like where you're heading. So when it comes to friendship breakups, and to reflect on myself, because I used to be such an avoidant person. I couldn't handle any sort of conflict. Like the thought of friendship conflict and talking about problems was like, it would give me so much anxiety. And it was like the same for romantic relationships. But what is the best way for people to kind of approach friendship breakups? And I guess before that, how do you kind of know your friendship is starting to be misaligned a little bit?
I mean, you notice it when little things start to bother you, but I think the most important part of it is like you have to deal with those conflicts. Like conflict is not a bad thing. It is having a conversation so you can find a resolution, and that makes the friendship stronger. It makes any relationship stronger. So I think a lot of people kind of freak out and they think that conflict is an argument when it's not. It's just a conversation. And if you're trying to have a conversation with someone and they're arguing, that's a red flag.
Yeah.
Like if me and you are friends and there's an issue, like you said something that bothered me, I need to bring that up. And I have to bring it up in a kind and nice way. I can't come in wailing, guns a-blazing, and being like, you said this to me.
Yeah. Or it's not that deep. There's always like words that people say too. And I think that's also why I used to not, now I'm very like, I'm open to having conversations. But back then I remember I was so conflict averse because sometimes people have their own protective bubble. And so you bring a problem to someone and they may be like, it's not that deep. And then you kind of feel a little bit silly because you're like, oh yeah, it's not that deep. It's just friendship. But like friendship is in some ways even deeper than like many of the romantic relationships we have. It makes it tricky depending on the person you're approaching and kind of how they receive you.
No, I honestly think friendships are that deep. Like there are things that I've said to my friends I do not tell my mother.
Not exactly.
I will never tell my boyfriend.
Like they know where the bodies are. Like it's too deep. It's so deep. And they honestly, your friends see you in every single stage of your life. You know, they've seen you at your best, at your worst, all the things that in dating you try to hide in the early stages because you're like, let me not show all my crazy sides. Your friends see everything.
Yeah, your friends see everything. We even have the most disgusting conversations, like
that you would never want the public to see. Yeah.
So even though we might think, oh, it's platonic, but it is that deep. It is what shapes us and what makes us women at the end of the day.
Yeah, no, it is what shapes us. People really need to think about when they want to approach those conversations. Obviously, you're approaching them in a respectful manner, but yeah, just not being afraid to address them head on. And now that I'm in this place, I have friends that come to me for advice on how to handle things with their friends. And I just realized people are very, very conversation averse. So what are some tips that you have for someone who wants to navigate friendship breakup? So an example could be maybe you and your friend are not aligned anymore. Your friend maybe wants to continue to be in your life in a certain way, but you are not looking for that anymore. Or you maybe are disappointed by a friend who's not showing up. And so you want to change the dynamic and expectations from that friend. How would you approach that?
Honestly, it's starting and having a conversation. Yes, it's awkward. A lot of people are like, oh, what's the point of having that conversation? I'd rather just quiet quit. But if you really care about this person and you consider them a friend, you consider them close, like having that conversation is a respectful thing to do. It's kind of like warning them and being like, hey, I'm in this place of my life. These are going to be my boundaries now. Like, I love you, but I don't think we align right now, which is okay because that's part of life. Like, we all go through our ups and downs, our roller coasters. We might not align right now, but maybe 3 years down the line, we'll get back together and we'll be in the same frequency. But it's having those conversations and not kind of leaving someone in the cold and the dark. And I think that leaving them in the cold and the dark is worse.
That's so traumatic. It's very glamorized on social media to ghost people and just walk away from situations.
It's horrible.
Because for you as the person who walks away, you're not thinking about it. And like maybe the reason you walked away isn't even that serious, or maybe it is. But for the other person, they're constantly thinking about what happened and they don't really get that sense of closure. I hate that it's so glamorized for people to have this non-emotional walk away from relationships or friendships without even having any sort of conversation.
Yeah. And a lot of people kind of hide behind the no contact. They think ghosting is no contact, which is completely different. No contact means that you have set your boundaries and you've had multiple conversations with this person, warning them about their behavior. And if they continue that behavior, like, we're not going to be friends anymore. And you finally get to a point where you're tired, and then you end the friendship and you go no contact. But ghosting is more like you don't have a conversation at all and you leave that person blindsided. And then that person is the one reaching out to you and you're ignoring them. And they're like trying to figure out, hey, what's going on? Did I do something wrong? Is there something that we can change? And the person ghosts, disappears, and ignores them without giving them any tip and nothing. And yes, okay, maybe it's not that deep. Maybe you've grown apart, but tell that to the person.
You're doing them a favor. Just let them know and you won't hear from them. But sometimes I also feel like having someone constantly reach out to you for some people serves a weird fulfillment. I've had situations where people have come to me and I've seen that they're being very conflict averse. Someone's reaching out to them. They want to talk about it and they're constantly reaching out. And I got the idea that maybe they liked the fact that that person was constantly reaching out because it gave them an opportunity to consistently reject them or make them feel less than. And maybe that's because they felt less than or something at that point.
I mean, it's an ego trip. Yeah. And honestly, big red flag if you ever notice a friend coming up to you and bragging about the fact that someone's reaching out to them and they're purposely ignoring them. That is a big red flag. Run for the hills. Do not be friends with that person, because when push comes to shove and it's your turn, they'll do the same to you.
Okay. I there have been instances where someone tells me how they manage conflict with a friend, and it's not how they manage conflict with me, but I sort of feel a little bit of concern and want to speak up and say, like, hey, ignoring someone who's reaching out to you because you're mad at them is not okay, especially if this person has reached out to you for 3 weeks. That makes me feel a little bit weird. But the younger version of me would be like, okay, well, it's not happening to me. It's not my business. But I think the way how you see others treat other people in their life is a reflection of how they will eventually treat you.
Amen.
Yeah,
Preach.
Literally. So it's for anyone listening, that's definitely something to consider. How do people show up for other people in their lives?
Yeah. And definitely if someone's bragging about how they're treating someone poorly, that's not a good sign.
Yeah, not at all. On the topic of friendship breakups, though, because I know you went going back to kind of what you said, this is what makes it a little bit tricky is sometimes you want to, let's say, demote a friendship. You want to demote a friendship, but can you really truly demote a friendship? I kind of think of it in the context of work. If your employer came to you and was like, hey, Sabrina, we're going to actually reduce your role, but we still would love you to stay here, continue to work and have a smile on your face. You'd be like, no, I'm getting the hell out of here. Can you truly demote a friendship? And I think that's what makes it kind of hard to have these conversations for some people. It's not that they don't want this person in their life. It's just maybe you're protecting yourself. Maybe they're not showing up for you how you need them to show up. And to reduce your expectations, you want to have a different type of friendship. But most people don't receive that.
I think so. And I think it also happens naturally too. Like with change in life, you go really strong friends for a season and then you kind of like tinker down a little bit. But if it's really an issue and it's not something that is happening naturally, having a conversation, yes, is awkward, but it is necessary. Yeah. It's telling them that you're setting boundaries. That's what the whole thing is. It's like, oh, if someone is being disrespectful towards me or overstepping or just not treating me the way I want to be treated in this season right now, it's letting them know so they have the opportunity to change, and letting them know what your boundaries and what your next steps are and doing that.
It's sort of just setting expectations. I think you kind of have to bucket people a little bit. It's not to say certain friends are more important than others, but I think there's some friends that you have maybe really intimate personal relationships with. They know about your family, your relationships. Maybe there's some friends that you just have a common interest and you play tennis every weekend together. Or maybe you have a friend that, you want to go out with on the weekends and that's kind of your relationship. I think sometimes when people have like misalignment in expectations, it's because maybe one person is looking for something and the other person has a different expectation.
Yes. And you'll notice that based on when they reach out to you, how you guys hang out. I mean, it's very rare to have like that full on friendship that does everything that is like, and when you do have that, like, it's a blessing. But you do need to bucket your friends. Some friends are party friends, and you can only hang out with them to drink and party. Some friends are workout friends. Some friends are like acquaintances where you kind of meet up here and there. And then there are those like true close friends. So, yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree. What are your thoughts on giving the same energy you receive in friendships? Is that sort of a passive aggressive
Yes.
tactic or okay?
Yes. Tit for tat, eye for an eye, I think is out of your own authentic self.
Mhm.
I think if you want to attract and keep the right people for you, you have to act as your true authentic self. If someone's behaving a certain way and you start to lower your frequency to behave that same way, like, what are you doing? Just understand that if someone's behaving a certain way, they're not the right person for you. Love them, remove them from your life, set boundaries, set them aside. But don't act out of your own authentic self.
Is that the same for if, maybe you reach out to someone more than they reach out to you, and so you kind of scale back how often you contact them? Is that kind of considered a passive aggressive tactic or
No, no, that's just learning to understand that someone's not giving you the same reciprocity.
yeah.
Yeah. But
But
you're still acting as your own true authentic self. I think if it would be tit for tat if, like, let's say I'm texting you a lot and then you don't text me and then you text me back like a few weeks later and then I purposely ignore you just to be like, let me show you how it feels to be ignored. That's a tit for tat.
Yeah, people do that so often. I don't know why. Just more natural too to just be yourself. It's a lot more work and it's more taxing to treat people how they treat you versus just being and treating people how you regularly treat people.
Yeah. And if it's something that bothers you in the friendship, that's a standard that you have. So, for example, if I'm somebody that likes to text my friends once a week, update them once a week, and you're somebody that wants to uh, only reach out once a month, if that bothers me, then I know that we're not on the same wavelength in the friendship. We're not compatible. We can have a conversation to be like, hey, I prefer this type of frequency of communication. You prefer this. Can we meet in the middle? Um, or you could just see it for what it is and just be like, okay, this person's not really going to be in the same frequency as me communication wise. Let me just set them aside and not be so on top of it.
Totally. What are some of the biggest friendship challenges that discuss with people who come to you for any sort of resolution or just the feedback you get across social media?
I feel like there's a lot of miscommunication because
Okay.
there is no communication. A lot of the problems, and you notice this when it comes to your friends as well, where they'll come up to you and they'll like kind of vent about somebody and talk about that person. But I always tend to be like, have you discussed this with them? Have you talked to them about this? Are you planning on having a conversation with them? And if they don't, then that just shows you that this person likes to just talk crap about somebody behind their back and likes the feeling that they get rather than talking to someone to vent, to see how to deal with the situation and handle it so that they can go and talk to that person and fix it. Yeah. But most of the time there's no communication whatsoever. And it's like two people being angry and passive aggressive towards each other when they could have a conversation and talk about it. And maybe, you'll figure out, oh, I saw it in this perspective. You saw it in that perspective. We both don't mean harm to each other. Let's apologize and let's move on and try to fix it next time.
Yeah, it sounds so easy, but yeah, you're right. Like literally the issue is just communicating or even trying to communicate. And you don't know how that's going to go. But I do find we don't give our friends a lot of grace like we do romantic relationships. And I don't know why that is, but it's just really interesting to me because I've even seen this. Friends will go to their partners right away with a problem. We have no issues holding back. But then when it comes to our friendships, we just can't vocalize and speak to them about the things that bother us.
I feel like that's probably society, the way we've been brought up, what we've learned. And it's kind of, like we don't talk to our friends about our feelings, which is strange.
You would think we do.
Yeah, right? We talk to our friends about everything else. Like, how come we can't talk about situations that need to be brought up?
There's a barrier to having a vulnerability and emotions with friends. Like emotions are only kept for romantic relationships or family ties. But when it comes to friends, all of a sudden it's weird to feel emotional or vulnerable or say, hey, you hurt me, or, I care about you. Like those are things that are a little bit taboo.
Yeah, no, I hear it a lot from people where it's like, oh, I don't want to have a friendship that's like a romantic relationship. And I'm like, no, that's completely different.
Yeah.
Like, and on top of that, with a romantic relationship, you still have to be friends with that person. Like
Yeah.
the foundation is a friendship. So like how is that different?
Yeah. Then another thing that ties back to as well is sometimes because people don't bring feelings because it also kind of comes off as like you have really high expectations for a friend, but maybe you do. And I think that goes back to bucketing your friendships. I'm curious on your thoughts about the idea of like low maintenance friendships and high maintenance friendships. I kind of think low maintenance friendships are an interesting concept in themselves because what I consider a friend is such a high barrier that I don't really have low maintenance friendships. And sometimes that kind of is interchangeable with maybe just like acquaintances or people in my network. What are your thoughts on low maintenance friendships? Because everybody wants to have a low maintenance friendship today.
I hate that word.
Me too. I hate it.
I think people have used low maintenance friendships to basically hide behind the fact that they're breadcrumbing someone and not really wanting to put any effort. I think a true low maintenance friendship is a friendship that has already a foundation, a friendship foundation. So, like the friend that you've known since college, the friend that you've known since high school, you already have that foundation built that throughout the years it becomes low maintenance because the house itself has already been built. Yeah. But people now come in and they're like, I want a low maintenance friendship where they don't want to build a house together. So they're just like sitting on a slab of concrete without windows, walls, or a roof, but expect the other person to show up to like put bricks down.
Yeah, that's such a good analogy. And like, who wants to do that?
And sooner or later, you're going to realize that this low maintenance friendship is actually just one-sided, and the other person just wants the perks of having a friend or retainer, a friend that they can call whenever they're bored and lonely. But you also don't get paid to be on standby, so it's not very fun.
Yeah, and it's also like why I also find that interesting too, because having a low maintenance friendship with someone you just met is kind of counterintuitive. If I'm barely talking to you, I don't know much about you.
What is that's the purpose an acquaintance.
That's an acquaintance. Like, why are we making it a cool buzzword?
No, we're faking it at this point. Like, don't call. I would feel very offended if someone called me a low maintenance friend. I'd be like,
me too. I'd be like, well, that's not how I show up. So I definitely don't want to be that. But yeah, I see a lot of that rhetoric on TikTok, especially, and it's very cool to want low maintenance friends and be like, oh my gosh, people expect so much, but maybe they're not friends. They're just your acquaintances, and that's okay. But I think the thing that's funny is the misalignment in what people want to give versus what they really need and what's fulfilling to them. Like, you want a friend. We watch all these shows like Sex and the City and, Gossip Girl, or even, well, Gossip Girl is a little bit of a questionable friendship example, but, in Sex and the City, you see all these like great friendships and everyone's like, oh, I wish I had friends that would, drop everything to come meet me when I have an emergency. But then you want to give low maintenance energy. So it doesn't work that way.
No, it doesn't. And honestly, if you take Sex and the City, there are those episodes where they call out their friends. Like, you notice Miranda calls out Carrie a lot.
I love Miranda. Miranda's aged so well in 2025. And I love that for her because she was so honest.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's one of those things that you also have to like hold your friends accountable when they're not being a good friend. And it's okay. Like, sometimes you have a friendship and you have your ups and downs and your bumps. And if someone's like not acting correctly, call them out and just be like, hey, love you, but like, why are you treating me this way? It's not okay.
Yeah, literally. Like, why are you treating me this way? And kind of like, I need you to change it. So
yeah. And a good friend is going to be like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to do it like that. I will change my ways.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. I want to kind of do a little bit, not rapid fire, but I have some questions where I want to get your friendship dilemmas slash just experiences. I want to get your thoughts on, is it a problem and something you should address, or is it something that maybe is just not of concern?
Okay.
So the first one is, you find out your best friend is lying to you or lying to their partner about something big. Do you tell the truth or stay out of it?
You tell the truth. Call them out.
Okay. So even if you got to tell them like, hey, you shouldn't.
Yeah, you're that friend who's supposed to be a confidant. And if you see your friend is like treating someone else poorly, badly, if you're friends, like you tell them, hey, I don't like the way you're treating this person.
Yeah.
Because eventually, if they continue that, they're going to do that to you later on.
Yeah. Even in the context of their partner as well. Be honest with your friends. Yeah, I agree. You have two close friends who secretly can't stand each other. Do you stay out of it, or do you give your friend feedback and kind of get involved? And these are two friends that can't stand each other that are also your friend.
I would set boundaries. If they can't stand each other and you want to stay friends with both of them, don't mix and mingle. Like, set boundaries and probably talk to both of them and just be like, hey, are you guys going to talk about this? Are you going to address it? Puts me in an awkward position. If they're not going to address it, then you make time for that friend separately and make time with the other friend separately and just keep them apart.
Yeah. What if it's, do you believe in taking sides?
Yes, when it comes to like, if someone did something really bad.
Mm-hmm.
Not something like tit for tat, not something that you could have just been like, hey, have a conversation and fix this. It's if someone like, sleeps with the boyfriend and you're in this position where it's like, wow, my friend really like hurt my other friend. I think it's principle. I think it's integrity to pick a side, because if not, you're just like enabling bad behavior and you're saying you're okay with it.
I do believe in picking sides, but the context has to be very clear. There's some things that you just have to call your friends out on out that are just like not okay, but it gets kind of tricky when you're stuck between two friends and their perceptions of an experience they had together. But then being in the middle is hard.
It is, but also listening to both sides and then holding them accountable where they've made a mistake. And usually it's when two people are having an issue, it's not necessarily always one person that's in the wrong. It could be both people that are like behaving wrong in both ways. So it's like, hold one friend accountable for the mistakes that they've made in that situation, hold the other friend accountable for the mistakes that they made in the other situation, and like try to get them to talk it out if it's possible. If not, they have to figure it out.
Yeah, you kind of have to stay out of it at that point. Okay, you meet a new friend. Everything seems okay. They have a good energy, but there's something about their vibe that just bothers you and makes you feel uncomfortable. So you can't put your finger on why you don't feel good about them, but they're a positive person. They're really nice. They've done nothing wrong to you. How do you feel about that? This one's interesting because I've had this in the past, and I hate to go off of gut feelings. I know we should trust our gut as women, but I'm more of I need to see something actually happen to make judgments on it. So what do you do when something in your gut feeling is just off about someone, even though they're super nice, they're great, they've done nothing to you?
I always say trust your gut.
Okay.
Like, I always say trust your gut. Like, sometimes people who are like super nice on the outside and you still feel like something's wrong, it's probably because they're putting up a huge mask. And if you're somebody who wants to see like proof, you're not really like 100%, I'm going to trust my gut, then sit back, relax, let the person behave how they naturally behave. Usually in 3-4 months' time, when they're comfortable with you, they will show you true colors. They will treat people in front of you the way that they naturally treat people. And then from there, you can make a decision whether you want to continue that friendship or not.
I feel like it never steers you wrong, honestly.
No, it doesn't.
Sometimes it does, but usually, no, you got to follow your gut.
Yeah.
I think even in romantic relationships, it's the same way, like trust your gut instinct.
Yep. Yeah.
Okay, this one I think is pretty obvious, but you have a friend that constantly cancels plans, even though they have good reason. Is it worth bringing it up to the friend or kind of just letting it slide?
First few times, slide. Okay. Life happens, emergencies happen, all that stuff. If it starts to become a pattern, so it's like 3 or more times, then you bring it up, especially if it's bothering you and it's something that you don't want it to continue, bring it up. Because I always say silence is compliance. If you don't say anything, then you're okay with it.
Yeah. How do they know?
Yep.
Cool. Thank you so much, Sabrina, for joining Well Versed. It was really lovely to interview you. I definitely recommend everyone checking her out. You have such amazing perspectives on your page. And I think it's worth, if you're going through any sort of friendship dilemma or just want to learn more about friendships, checking out Sabrina's TikTok. She has a lot of good gems on there. Can you talk a little bit more about your workbook as well and what someone can get out of purchasing the workbook and kind of guiding through that?
Yeah, so purchasing the workbook is on Amazon. It's called We Used to Be Best Friends. It's basically a friendship workbook that you go through after a friendship breakup. So I've set it up step by step on how you heal while going through that friendship breakup. And it's based on like research as well as like my own experience. So purchasing it, you're going to see a lot of like little inside stories, red flags, green flags to how to make better friends in the future. Also how to like get over the friendship breakup. So it's very healing.
I love that. I feel like I haven't heard of anything like that existing. Thank you for joining. And where can everyone find you?
TikTok at the third side, Instagram at the third side _ Yeah.
Everything the third side. That is such a great name. But yeah, thanks everyone for listening to Well Versed, and I'll catch you in the next one.
Thank you so
Bye.
much. Bye.